And then we do some announcements, like
Yeah.
I completely forgot.
Oh, we're live now, Denzel.
And then we do some
no!
announcements.
Okay.
Like, I completely
Live,
forgot.
you guys have an intro? You have a cool intro.
Yeah, we have a really cool
No, we
intro
don't.
we go with.
This is the intro.
This is really cool already.
Oh, well, come on, you guys got it's gotta be like a radio show, like
We'll
you
do
say
back to it.
CYK, yeah,
Come
from
on.
Cincinnati, and then
Yeah.
every person that comes on does their version.
Yeah,
you know.
welcome to Radio Lab. Here we go.
All right, you guys need some production. What's going on here?
I don't know. I think Tim's voice is pretty soothing. He got kind of a late night radio vibe.
Yeah. It's a really good voice. Get to hear it
That's
all
a
day.
lot of bad habits, let's just say.
Well, welcome everyone. Whoever's watching, let us know how the volume is and everything. We just want to get it right before we get deep into the art talk.
And not be liable for damages to eardrums.
Oh, buddy, can you?
Yeah.
I forgot. Put the image of the Firestarter winners on the screen. If you can't figure it out, then.
I can't figure it out.
Just
No man, I can't. Fine. Let me grab that.
On Facebook. Anyway, is our audio good? Hello,
Test.
friends. Oh, they're good.
Sounds good to me, but
Mine's all good. I'll check.
We're not sharing faces yet. We're just putting on a bit of makeup. Then we can get on with that.
I'm putting on my bag.
What?
makeup, hair and makeup.
Yeah, makeup. 1 second. You want this to be the...
Shadow.
Okay, I'm gonna try to figure this out, Denzel. Add a scene, I guess.
Yes, and a scene or image, I guess. Actually, I don't actually know. One or the other will probably work.
Fine, image.
Man, both of you guys are like so prolific in your respective things, like design and industry, but I can't even come up with a question to ask both of you. It's ridiculous. Come on. Something.
It's okay. We can just start with introductions. Like, tell us about you. Why is your name Jeff and why is your name Tim? And who are you? Who are you? Yeah.
Why are you?
Why are you?
Why are you?
I guess we can start with.
You want to get going?
Yeah,
Let's start.
Right, let's start, man.
You want to turn off the image?
No, I don't want to turn it off.
Buddy.
Alright, turn it off. There we go. There we go.
So we're starting.
We're in. We're live. We see the face of Paul, so I guess we start with Paul. Introduce yourself, good sir.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Richards. I'm a concept artist based out of Bellevue, Washington, USA, working for Epic Games on Fortnite, previously Paragon. About 20 years deep into this business. My wife, Lena, is also a concept artist working for a local company called ArenaNet.
Nice.
We live here with our 2 cats, and shortly I'll be coming to visit Toronto later this month for Edge Control. And I get to meet all of you wonderful people in the flesh.
Yes. Excited. I just want to say, Paul has been a huge design inspiration for myself, and I'm sure a lot of different people out there. So if you're not aware of this man's work or his tutorials and guidance online, definitely check out his blog at autodestruct.com. I'm sure there's some older stuff that you want to brush up on there, but
yeah, it's kind of a mess. Before we started, Tim, who's here on the stream, was telling me about kind of an outdated blog spot, and I think that's pretty common these days. We all have our where we started, and then we cast that skin off and escape to the next platform. So autodestruct.com was my very first website, and it was a remnant from a web anthology thing I was doing with some friends. And just the domain fell to me, and I started posting work there. But yeah, it's like super old, probably made with like Macromedia Dreamweaver, and so a lot of the stuff there is like kind of dated, but it sends people off to various other locations. So
definitely. I'm just gonna quickly drop the link in there.
I got it.
Oh, you got it? Cool.
I got it.
All right.
Yeah, you'll be able to see an outdated Patreon link that's no longer active. A bunch of like a Tumblr that I don't post to anymore. Blogspot, which has been long dead, but there's still stuff up there if people want to poke through. It's kind of like it's kind of like a fun exploratory thing.
It's creative.
Digital fossils, man. It's archaeology at this point.
Right. It's like let people dig for you. That's
yeah.
No, there's a lot of good stuff there for sure. Like I still need to go through it. Even if you think it's old, I think it's gold.
Oh,
wow. Bravo.
Excellent.
Like
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, as you move further back, I feel like perhaps when I first started out, I was a little bit less tainted and less jaded. I think this thing that we're all wrapped up in now of posting art online, there's a lot of businessy stuff mixed in. You can kind of see people are trying to maneuver more these days and get their work seen by the right people at the right time via the right hashtags. And I think back when people were first starting, we all just wanted an online presence, an online portfolio, and just a way to kind of cough the work up online and archive it.
Yeah, totally.
It was more, I feel like a pure pursuit, and sometimes I wish that we could go back to a gallery system that didn't have numeric values attached.
Yeah, for real. I mean, everybody, yeah, and usually, I remember 80% of them were like, "Here's my stuff." Like that's it. It's just, yeah, it's like you just need to get it out, right?
Yeah, Lena, my wife, has a Squarespace website. It's really slick, lenarichards.com, and that's kind of what I wish everybody still had, like just like the one website where it's just their stuff. But obviously, it's beneficial to be seen within the context of ArtStation because of all the traffic and all the activity, and you feel like you're swept up into a bigger movement, and you get everybody else's energy riding along with you, and no man is an island. So, but even so, there's part of you that kind of like wants to see your work spotlit, and to not have it immediately compared to somebody who's working in a vastly disparate style to you, etc.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. It's been like a wonderful platform for that. I mean, you sell it so well.
Well, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches, right? Like ArtStation and all these sites. It's like a buddy of mine calls it drinking from the fire hose. I don't think we've ever had more art to look at.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's similar to sort of what happened with sort of smartphones having a camera on them, right? It used to be a lot more difficult to take a photo and get it from camera to somewhere where people can kind of consume it.
Right.
So in a weird way, and I think I read somewhere, it's sort of the idea that it forces the cream to the crop actually higher, though. There's a bigger base to that pyramid now because everybody is so accessible, which just means to stand out, it needs to be that much more exceptional. So in a weird way, it's like the pro stuff at the very top, and whether that's sports and you have more people playing it or, whatever it is, it sort of creates this interesting thing where the pyramid can reach higher because the base is wider.
Sure.
But
that footage
at the same time, like, you feel it when it was like, oh, is our little thing, like, growing up and even at art school going like, I want to be a concept artist in like the early 2000s. Nobody said that. Everybody else was thinking about being an illustrator for like New Yorker magazine or doing movie posters, and even then and doing comics, and even then most of the people that were teaching us thought that was weird. So then when you come in, you're like, yeah, I want to design like, designing Darth Vader's helmet. is what my analogy, because that's sort of the, Macquarie's kind of the godfather of us all. But they would look at you like you're weird, designing, like I don't even know that they thought about it. And so it's like, yeah, it felt like this thing that, like, have you seen this art of something book, and nobody knew about it, and now it's just like kind of it's exploded to the point, which is of course great, and it just forces, I think, the quality up. I mean, if you think about like what the kind of portfolio I had when I got hired compared to kind of portfolios we're looking at Ubisoft, and still going like, they could improve some, and it's like, it's incredible, right? It's like this is,
Well, it's incredible, but there's a flip side. There's also sort of this kind of nuclear arms race where people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's like it can be quite daunting, and I have to wonder sometimes if people are seeking out these new methods because they genuinely like them and feel that they're suited towards them, or if they feel like they're simply trying to compete in a ever like increasing resolution marketplace.
Yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, I've, the project we're working on at work right now,
NBA.
with Zabby, actually, in the call, which we can't speak of, but we've sort of I've been trying to champion that. I think we've done a pretty good job, Zabs, but we've been championing sort of that workflow. I mean, it was a few years ago when me and Oscar Cafaro, who I think you guys had on, we started to sort of, there was basically one project where we were like, wow, can we like get these model, basically didn't have a character artist, and we had a couple technical artists that were doing a lot of engineering kind of work behind the scenes, but there was like a missing gap between sort of, here's our cool designs, and like somebody actually being able to interpret them and give them a great asset. So we started to look into like, okay, maybe in SketchUp at least we could like block out, they happen to be robots at the time, but maybe we can block out something that sort of fits, like at least proxy model wise, and we can get it to the team, and they can put it in, and then our proportions are at least maintained, right? So it's like an interpretation problem. And then we started taking that farther. Cafaro ran with it. That sort of coincided with, concept artists really embracing that sort of workflow. And for me, I've never been one to chase down those kind of tools. I sort of enjoy painting. I enjoy drawing, and I enjoy painting, like the actual, wow, look how that brush stroke, and I made that leaf. Like, it feels good. You know what I mean? That part of it, I think you're right in a way. There's people who want to get to the end product, and it's about the end product. And so the love of sort of craft all the way through maybe isn't there. And, maybe does that matter? I don't know, if as long as you're getting to like the kind of design you want, who knows? But the
it definitely takes a village.
Chain though, like it's the stuff that Zabby and these guys can do, compared to how long it would take me to like hand render it. I'd probably enjoy it, right? Whereas it's that part of it for me is like, but it takes me a lot of time. Whereas these guys are bringing such crazy skills that it's just a pleasure, to be able to work with them and just see how far we can push it. But it's kind of disruptive to the pipeline, I got to tell you, because it means downstream modelers and stuff are now able to be given a proxy model. So now that, modeling team as artists and textures are getting way more specific sort of stuff. That's like, well, you have the OBJ now, so just, you don't, like, can you just clean it up and make it game ready? And so it's good. That's great from a perspective of like a production perspective, but it means like it puts pressure on the art teams, because essentially concept artists are absorbing parts of the job that would have been elsewhere. So it's an interesting thing that's also happening across the board in like a production sort of setting.
It happens. I think. I mean, like I feel more like it takes a village, and I guess I've always liked kind of handing it off to the next person to plus it.
Oh, exactly. I think all of us
this
know
idea
that,
of having
right?
to
Like
kind
that's
of like do their food for them, and like have to kind of keep raking my hand over a thing for like days and days on end, when all my mind wants to do is keep moving, is bothersome. And I don't know that all modelers necessarily appreciate having to kind of like start with this thing that's 80% of the way there.
Oh yeah, well, both, right? I think like sometimes you will get, I've worked with whole teams that have that it's 50-50 sometimes. Some teams really love having something really accurate to try and work from. And so the closer I think you can get with like a proxy model or something, some people love that because they just want to polish and make like you said, they want to sort of take it to the next level. But then I've worked with guys that are, have a different, and gals of course, but have a different outlook on it, which is, they kind of want a loosey-goosey sketch, and then they want to be able to participate with sort of a bit of the creation and sort of that moving towards a concreteness, and it's hard because they used to have to do that a lot more, I think, right? Like you look at some of the concept art from back in the day from like Shinkawa and stuff, on Metal Gear, and it's like you have to have people that like actually are like, I can make, like, I know what a good silhouette of a character is, and I know all that, and I get that information from some crazy ink blobs, but then the feeling is maintained somehow. And so it's kind of an interesting sort of, there's a range there, I think, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I don't know that it's better. I don't know that it's like a good way to go, but you can see how in the drive for one department to just make insane imagery and make it more and more realistic to try and compete with the engines, you also see sort of other people and other teams taking different routes to get there. So it may mean, oh, okay, now we're going to use concept artist models to sort of start, or some places might be like, no, you guys just stay in 2D and we let them interpret. So
I kind of want to.
If you're shipping the stuff off overseas, and you don't want to have the thing get sent back 6 or 7 times with tweaks.
Yeah.
Then having a thing that's completely rock solid, like I get it. It's better for production. But for Muggins here that has to kind of supply the product and get it to that point, it's like I'm not really enjoying myself on like day 12 of an assignment. These things used to be out of our lives a lot sooner, and now it's like it's not uncommon to have to spend upwards of 2 weeks on a thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the other reason too, right? I mean, in a weird way, some of those workflows, especially it depends on what you're doing, right? In the case of robots or industrial design-y kind of stuff, it's significantly cuts down, the kind of time it would take for you to get all that perspective and ellipses and all this stuff perfect. And I mean, depends on the style, but usually the stuff we're working on is for, sort of realistic games and projects. So it's usually that, whereas I think, there's a different, we have a team at Ubisoft Toronto that's like building sort of their own IP from scratch, and it's a totally different vibe, it's a totally different sort of set of circumstances. You're trying to create worlds, and it has like a little bit of a playfuler look. It's not trying to be, super ultra Assassin's Creed realistic. So
I hate
it affords, I think, different artists different opportunities in that way.
I hate to be doing this. I'm sorry. This is really good conversation. You guys got into really heated, but like the audience kind of confused. Who are you, Tim? Quick intro before we keep going. Yeah.
Quick intro.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they confer from some of it, but yeah. Sorry, my name's Tim Anderson. I'm a associate art director at Ubisoft Toronto. I've been working for like 15 years now, and 98.7365% of that is as a concept artist. I used to originally, I went to Sheridan, which is in Ontario, in Oakville. I grew up just outside of Toronto, and my first gig was at Silicon Knights, which is now defunct, but was a studio in St. Catharines, Ontario. Worked there for almost 5 years, and then was off for about a year. Layoffs happen, people, and and then I started working at when they opened Ubisoft Toronto, and been working there for 8 years this year.
Wow.
Welcome.
Yeah, and that's about it. And I work with Zabby and Denzel there, which is super awesome to be able to work with you guys, by the way.
Oh, Tim, my heart.
My fiance is a sculptor. We live in Toronto. Oh no, it's not a lot more
Well, that's
interesting
pretty good right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
stuff than that.
Like Tim said, like we work together, and honestly, every day is amazing. The way the amount of stuff he knows, not just about how to draw stuff, more like just life things and how things work that you can put together to make concept. That's really, really good. Always pushes my work. Yeah, get inspired to do the task rather than making it a task. It's awesome. It's awesome.
I kind of wanted
Yeah,
to.
you gotta love it, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Like a lot of this can feel like factory work, like Paul was saying, right? By day 12, but in a weird way. And yeah, since I've sort of starting to sort of flirt with the whole art director thing, it's interesting because I want to grab everything and draw it, of course, right? I want to be able to like, all right, Abby, which I've done a couple times. Of course, you can't help it, but they're like, let me drive. So I'll jump in his chair and I'll be like, you see the curve here, whatever. But ultimately, you think back to how you wanted to be treated and how you sort of your ideas when you're coming out of college and sort of the fire that you had, and it's like, I'm not that much older than these guys, but I'm really cognizant of that, and I sort of empathize with that desire. So what we try and do is, yeah, you got to make it fun, even if it's a garbage can. You got to try and figure out, how can I improve on the garbage can? The garbage can has been the standard garbage can. You've seen it in a million games. You've seen it all over the world. But maybe there's something I can do with it aside from making it legally safe so we can actually put it in our game and all the rest. But yeah, you should be able to, or at least practice rendering, dented metal, whatever it is, or cheat by using. You shot no.
Oh, whoa, whoa.
Just shot
You
across the
calling me
bow.
a cheater?
That's for all my painter friends. Um, but yeah, no. Sorry, I'm rambling now.
So good.
Okay. I did want to go back to an earlier point in the conversation, just about art and industry and being your own brand and stuff like that. Like, neither of you guys have an online or as much of an online presence now. Like you Paul, you did, like, for the most part, like back. I remember like 3-4 years ago, like coming across your blog and learning, more or less design knowledge and how to think like a person and how to do art like a person properly. So I'm
We are
curious
human
about
person.
like and you, Tim, you don't like your last post was like in 2010. So I'm curious
Yeah.
about like how do you guys find like the landscape the way that it is now is like seemingly you constantly, or at least you need an online presence to kind of break in, or at least that's the impression that a lot of newer artists or younger artists are getting.
I mean, it's funny you said that because ultimately, if if we were going to get a coffee, and somebody was like, "Here's my dope portfolio," which has happened, and it's terrible, and it's awkward, and it's weird. But I mean, if it's sick, I don't know that like, you know what I mean? Like at a certain point, you're like, "This is amazing work." Now, obviously, with the internet age, it's easier just to sit back at your desk and let HR fire you, portfolios that come through. But I think yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think I always admired Mullins actually because well, for a long time, I don't know if the same is true, but he basically just had his website. So it was always like, throw things in a folder, as Paul said, had it probably hooked up with Dreamweaver and all that stuff. And it'll update itself, and I just manage it myself. And like, kind of, he stayed consistent with that for a while. I don't know that I saw him in a lot of other places like conceptart.org, which is sort of the precursor, like before ArtStation. Um, that I would see a few of his paintings there, but then you go to his site and that's where all the stuff would be. So I always admired that because I think, like Paul, like you're saying, those platforms change so much that it actually takes a lot of work to keep sort of updating that, and then to move to Instagram and be like, well, because I'm dealing with that now, because everybody's like, she might fiance like, you have to get your stuff on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, I'll look into that. And then I go through, you have to remember, we have, me and Paul have 20-30 years of art now to look through and go, oh, what's good? I don't know anymore, what am I doing? So you just go with the latest thing, you throw it in there, and it's weird because it in a weird way, I think of, for me at least, a lot of times it was always like your body of work. I mean, that's coming from like an old school sort of ancient art, being a true art, fine artist kind of idea, where it's like the work of your life, right? And ultimately, it's just this journey through all this stuff. So it's weird, I think, in the digital age, because these platforms keep changing. So you have to kind of keep jumping to where the audience is. And it becomes fractured. You know, it's always going to become fractured unless you just stick with, again, like Mullen's kind of style. There's my website. Go to my website, goodbrush.com. That's it. Like, it's always been that. Always will be that. I might be on other platforms here and there, but that's like the main place. I don't know if that's true, by the way. I'm just kind of.
Yeah, Tim, if I could interject, there's a new term that's come to my attention called content cadence. It's the rate at which a game updates itself with new little goodies and stuff to keep the audience interested.
It's very Fortnite of you.
Yeah, these games with like high content cadence or stringing people along with things. It's very much in line with how people consume everything now. It's stream, feeds. Listen,
Totally. Yeah.
That word, and so you feel as though artistically you have to kind of keep with that drip. You have to keep that content cadence going, but it's like doing that for its own sake because you feel like you have social pressure to do so.
Right.
I mean, I don't see that as a sustainable way of operating, especially with like how quickly a thing disappears down a feed or here today, gone tomorrow. So it's like, I think the best we can really hope for is to occasionally, put out a few things that kind of remind you people that you're still around, but to try to kind of keep up with, trying to latch on to the algorithm and stuff. I see that as a losing battle and an exhausting battle.
Well, what about like oversaturation of like more artists are going to come in?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. You create a supply and demand thing too, right? Like ultimately it cheapens I think it cheapens the individual content, right? If like you said, we could spend weeks making a beautiful like 6-panel comic thing, put it on Instagram. Oh, it's dope, whatever. People will fly through that like before they've got their pants down on the toilet, basically.
Right.
And like literally, and it's like, oh, that you used to have to go buy a comic book to get that, and so there was a transaction there. There's like, and so in a weird way, it's like, look how all these digital companies and sort of like the app makers in the tech world have made these platforms, which is us giving each other free stuff to each other where they make money off of our stuff. Like in a weird way, it's like, what? So then all of us are figuring out like, hey, buy my tutorial here, buy my prints, you're trying to figure out some way that like, does the world value what I do enough so I could continue doing it? And it's super tough, and I think it ends up driving down, like we said, as the quality now goes up with sort of the ubiquity of these tools and how easier it is to create a higher quality product, especially if the audience isn't as discerning. It means there's more pressure to just drive down prices and sort of, do that kind of stuff. And you can see it in a lot of industries, right? It sort of happens. But that's why I think as artists, we have to sort of champion the idea of, somehow, keeping a supply and demand. I mean, you can't give your stuff away that easily, right?
I think the conceit when everyone first starts out and they're really thirsty is that they're in that mode where they're trying to prove themselves.
Oh, do this for exposure.
Wait till they get a load of me. I think that dies off a little bit the longer you go at this, and the new game shifts to, sure. Can I make work that in some way pleases myself? Because you get to thinking that you can't satisfy every possible demographic. You can't try to like get into the algorithm. Like
I agree with you. I think that's creative maturity
of like why you're doing it. You ask yourself those things time and time again, and sometimes it's really irrational. Sometimes it's just the dopamine hit of like, last time I posted this, I got this many likes, and that felt good. I got validation from this peer overseas. I got to my following increased, my status increased. Okay, and next hit,
Right, right.
You're constantly chasing the dopamine, and it's a game that we've all been roped into, and we're so vain and so egotistical that we've swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny
Artists
because I don't like. This is where I. It's interesting because I depart from everybody with this because I don't post. So it's we like, I always get that fulfillment from being at the studio, really, and from literally from Zabby and the guy. Like, if the guys that now I've been doing that for a long time of working in house with a large number of teams. Actually, I think I've been blessed like that. Like even at SK, we had I think 8 or 9 concept artists, which at that time was like, whoa, that's a lot. Now in Toronto, we're at 22 on the various projects. So there's actually a lot of people you can be, and it's kind of like art school, right? You can go back to that thing of being like, hey guys, look, I just dropped this texture over it. The best thing is you don't have to finish it, right? All of us can see it. You don't even like, you don't need to clean the edges and all, make it like fit with whatever. You can just kind of like throw it on and be like, oh my god, are you guys seeing this? And it's like, yep, sick. And then it just like everything just keeps rolling. And it's like that's what I love about the studio sort of atmosphere is is that kind of thing. And so I've had a lot of fulfillment, I think, from that, and like getting to work with some really great artists
Can I ask you a
and
question about
quirky artists and stuff like that. So and I don't know if it's that or whether I don't know. I don't have a lot of desire, and I don't post on social media in general though. So it's not. I don't know. For me, it's not a thing, and I think it's different for a lot of people I know at least. It's sort of at least from that generation maybe. Like we were on Facebook, got on Facebook sort of in college, and like the first million whatever people on Facebook, and it was like cool, whatever you know, and it turned into this thing that all of us, it was kind of like getting on Rainbow Six in the first year. You're like, okay, there's some cool content, but, or Fortnite or something, right? And then like later, all the cool shit comes out, and you're like, I played that though, I wasn't that good. And, but yeah, so for that generation, at least for a lot of my friends in that regard, they posted online to get a job. And then once you get the job, they're like, okay, I don't need to it's like putting your resume online. It's just as if it was an accountant, right? It's like, oh, my resume is up on LinkedIn. Oh, okay, now that I got a job, I don't need to update it now. It's like they're not posting every day, like, look at how I broke down this accounting thing. Obviously, art's different, but I don't think like in a weird way that they like there's a drive there to sort of look for that. And I find like, especially if you're doing freelance or you're starting out, you're posting to sort of get, to see if you can do it and see if you can get these followers and it means something. There's like this cachet with that now, but it's like a lot of people I know that have that, it's converting that into, where they can live their life off of it. And for me back then, it was like, hey, I'm posting on here because I want to show stuff and sort of get out there because I was out of the job and I was like really trying to be relevant, right? And like you said, there is like a dopamine hit of like, yeah, oh man, like this is what you're doing now, mind blown, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, and then get a job, and I was like, okay, I don't need to bother with that stuff anymore. So I don't know what that says about me, but it's just
well,
something.
art life is ongoing, and you're trying to better yourself for your own reasons. But I think within the professional sphere, there's a snowball effect that occurs. One job kind of does beget another. You put out work for one project that garners interest for the next thing down the line. So you can kind of chill back on trying to be, first in line and the loudest voice in the room.
Right.
It's not to say that you should rest on your laurels and become like a weekend warrior, but I'd like to ask, since you're in an art director role, so you feel like you get a lot of creative say and a lot of influence into the project, and that's what's allowed you to kind of take most of your satisfaction from the job and abstain from posting personal work. Do you still do personal work that you don't post?
Yeah, I do actually. I've actually the last few years have been a little bit different. I've kind of been slowing down. It'll come in fits and spurts, sort of thing. But I haven't. I mean, the art director thing has just been, for me for the last year or so, I guess at this point. And it's mostly sort of, if in other circumstances, it's kind of visual development, right? So it's sort of art director with the concept artist. So, but most of my time is just spent with, everybody that's into exactly what we're talking about today, right? Like just design and like, shape languages and like look how you repeated the same triangle, amazing, it's beautiful, I love it, right? And it's just like living in that sort of space. So I think like I get a lot of the satisfaction there, and I don't know, I sort of would, in a weird way, I think I've always felt like the art or the project or whatever we're doing together is the thing that I kind of want to see in lights. I don't, which is a sad in a weird way that I don't think about leveraging that for, Tim Anderson is something because of that, right? It's just I don't know, it's kind of an old school mindset. Like I work at Ford, so I'm a Ford man. I don't know. It's like really
the difference to bring up that some people are, they really are, at their core team players, and they like to be part of an ensemble cast. And then there's
well, and I don't do freelance really. That's the other thing too, right? So I haven't really felt the need to, and I'm pretty comfortable, in my life. So I here and there I'll do some jobs. Like I did some jobs for some friends sometimes, right, for their their projects, or some early work, on projects people were starting when they left the studio or whatever. Sort of help them kick off some stuff. But yeah, I don't actively um, put my stuff out there to be sort of and contacted to actually do a lot of work and do it regularly. I play a lot of sports. I spend a lot of time outdoors, and yeah, I sort of have a, in a weird way, a different kind of art life balance like that, I guess. But I've always kind of been like that, right? I mean, I gotta say, um, honestly, that even in college, a lot of my friends had sketchbook. Like they're the kind of people that almost started even sketching the TTC in Toronto. There's sort of a thing, but there was like a ton of people that did just did that, right? They would just fill sketchbook after sketchbook with um, sort of just pouring it out and just like really super obsessive on the craft. And originally I was like, wow, am I even an artist if I can't, you know what I mean? If I'm not that crazy about it. I have one friend, Roberto Robertson. He's a concept artist as well. Um, he went to school. We were in the same class at Sheridan College, and I mean, he would do a composition that was great. It was a sketch. It was beautiful. Okay, cool. And then he would redraw it, and I mean, 45 times, just the same thing. There's like, oh, maybe just the head, this character's head's a bit bigger and the foot's more forward, and like just crazy until he got this one that he felt like he just had to go through it. It was this weird sort of super obsession with it. I also had other friends on the other end of the spectrum who only did one for if the project was you need to hand in this illustration, they would draw it on the foam core or whatever the hell it was, illustration board, and then they would start painting it, and then they would be like, oh, no, it's not good, and then they would keep painting on the same painting on the same illustration board, and they would fix it, and there was only ever one drawing, and it was underneath that painting, and they would erase it so the surface is all messed up with the eraser, and it's like then the paint looks like shit. And it was just like they didn't do that iterative sort of process. So I find like I fall in the middle, and I always felt like yeah, I mean, am I obsessed enough about this stuff? I forget the original point I was going to make. Lost in my memories there, but yeah.
Well, it does kind of sort of put us on different sides of the scale in a sense, because I don't know, I definitely always have been about the art part of it. I never, like, some people get into this business to work on games, and I always felt
I didn't either, actually.
I just happen to be working on games, but it's really really about the art, and it's really about the love of drawing and that experience. And
yeah. No, and honestly, I'm the same way. I just meant like drawing wise, I would draw until I felt like I was satisfied, and then I could paint it and move forward. And the other guys would they paint the one perfect one, or they paint a million because they're unsure of it. And so at a certain point, I figured out there was like an efficiency kind of there. But yeah, I never really wanted to get into games myself either. Actually, it was more, I was coming from looking at McQuarrie stuff and like the Star Wars, art of Star Wars kind of back in the day. and yeah, I just wanted to work on cool stuff. And at that point, it was movies was sort of the big thing. But the first job I got was at Silicon Knights, and it just ended up being an actual concept job, you know, fairly close to home. Not that that mattered, but it was like, oh my God, this is a real concept job, and they're going to pay me real money to actually literally draw Darth Vader's helmet, quote unquote. So I was like, let's do it. And it ended up being games. And yeah, so I've sort of been there ever since. And yeah, and Zabby and these guys know too. I think they're coming in a bit more pure because obviously they're younger. And they haven't been in sort of that sphere like you're saying for a long time, but I try and keep that alive, right? I mean, it's nice. My fiance is like a sculptor in Toronto, so we have a lot of friends in sort of the fine art community here. So it's great to sort of be able to bridge those worlds and kind of remember what art really is, because yeah, inside a game studio, production turns into, it can be a factories, right? So it's like, especially when you're trying to ship especially massive open world games, you know, the kind of games that Ubisoft makes, it's like there's a lot of, you got to put your head down, you have to make those 15,000 props, you know, and it's, you know, some technologies are helping alleviate that at this point, but there's still a lot of sort of manual labor involved, and the love can drain out of it. So at least what I can do with the concept guys is try and keep them, like I said, even if they're drawing garbage cans, is yeah, keep the art alive, because it should be, I mean, these guys know my philosophy is vastly sort of different from a lot of what they've kind of encountered sort of elsewhere in like games, especially. A lot of the people we've sort of had the pleasure or displeasure of working with have a really different sort of way of looking at it, right?
All this just gets me thinking, like, what's next after all this? You know, like, what's like, are we going to keep working in games? Is there going to be some emergent new media that we're all going to migrate to? You know, like
There's VR.
Yeah, I guess, you know, VR is the thing, right? Well, it's funny because there was a few of my friends and I wanted to start some VR stuff on the side and like see what it was about and whatever, and like we talked about it for quite a while actually. But it was funny because there was always some trepidation, like, is it gonna take off though? Like, and you could, because you can just sense the idea that like the hardware required and sort of the space required, like it's literally the VR to do it right. It sort of interrupts our layouts of our homes and all this kind of stuff, right? You need a space for it, you need a room for it, and you need to spend a lot of money, at least right now, to get into it. So I mean, I think it'll come, but does it change how we do our stuff? I don't know. I don't know.
Not to segue you, but it's like I talk to people who do work in VR, and we kind of talk shop, and it sounds like it's a lot of the same kind of problems. I mean, obviously they're dealing with things like experience design, but I'll hear them hemming and hawing over some issues that sound not dissimilar from the things that I go through. And so it's just like, oh, it's like a different version of this job that we've already had.
Right.
So I guess my larger question is just like, what do we really want out of art? What do we really want out of, what's the end game? Is there an end game?
Do you have any theories as to what would happen or not?
Well,
I mean,
I'm like, gosh, I'm 39. I'll be 40 this year, and it just, I don't know. I had kind of thought that at this point things would have moved on, and that I would have maybe had something within that could have blossomed further than it. Just a disappointment in the self, I guess. Like pride in the accomplishments of things I've done with teams, and now this kind of like look inward at like, oh, what have I done, and what could I accomplish from here, or is it going to just be the same thing on loop, to retirement?
I'm right with you there, man. Holy shit.
And everyone right now is they're trying to monetize, they're trying to create, their Kickstarter campaigns and their Patreon and coffee, and try to make hay off what they're doing. And again, there's that hope that in that sea of creators that there's going to be this loyal fan base, the 1,000 fans or whatever you've heard, that's going to like catapult us all out of the situation where we're dependent on these larger organizations to float us. And some people succeed spectacularly, but then there's a great number of people who are doing, just okay enough to get by or fall into the lower percentile. It's just I don't mean to be a downer. It's just one of these things that I think about more often these days, about like what's next after all of this, or am I going to just kind of keep riding this tide? Because it's a very comfortable tide. The people that I work with are wonderful. There's always great talent in all these companies. And as you transition from one to the next, you see these patterns, and all of them have their rewards, but all of them are kind of different versions of the same general situation.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a fascinating observation. I think I feel right. I'm right with you, man. I'm 37 this year. And yeah, like after having done this for not as long as you, but close, I guess. At a certain point, it feels for me. It's the meaning in it, and that's why I feel like I'm always trying to pressure Zabby and these guys to like, hey man, but like it can look cool. I get that now. Like I feel like we hit the point where it's like it better look cool. You're a pro, okay? Like it's like bottom line is you shouldn't be working if you don't make stuff look cool. That's like literally my feeling on it. Now, obviously, when we're meeting students and all this kind of stuff, there's different expectations. But I feel like when we're trying to execute on the team on these kind of crazy hundreds of multi-million-dollar projects that are going to be seen by millions of people, you have to be able to execute. And so for me, that's not a question. And these guys do, and that's why we're working with them. And the guys, like you said, we work with, there's so many talented people. It's just it's insanity, really. And it's great to have that sort of energy and try and rally them to something. But at the same time, I always say to them, I'm like, okay, but yeah, let's put some depth behind it, right? Put some meaning behind it. If people are going to consume this stuff, having it look cool isn't good enough. And I think it's part of what you're saying. I'm trying to like make coming into work be a bit more than about like, are those the dopest colors you could throw together on a character's backpack or whatever, right? It's like I want to say something about, I don't know, backpack manufacturer from the past, or I like just come up with something, right? I don't know. But if you're gonna make backpacks, research backpacks, right? And this is what Zabby was talking about, where I get really into sort of, in my philosophy, it's understanding the subject matter. I come from a time when there was obviously the internet, but there wasn't a ton of content on it. So looking for Google images, didn't give you tons of stuff. And looking at books is where we would see magazines, whatever, get reference from wherever you can. But actually, Denzel and I were talking about this the other day at lunch about drawing, Denzel. But the idea that you sort of you take from the reference and you kind of like you work yourself into it, and in order to be great at drawing like a horse's head or whatever from every angle, you actually have to understand the horse's head. And this is where I think some of those tools, it crosses over with some of those tools where if you've lost the passion, if you're just drawing the horse's head because it's a mechanical thing, that kind of sucks, even if you're doing art for work. But if you can somehow find out, and this is what kind of Zabby was speaking to, I grew up sort of reading Owl magazine, if anybody knows that. It's super psycho old. But it was sort of a kid's version of National Geographic. And I've since had like a National Geographic sort of a subscription my grandfather got me like back in the 80s or whatever, and I've kept up with it. And I've always just been fascinated by nature and all this stuff. And it's been a great resource for me because I feel like you're going back to the inspiration, right? That is like, aside from anything human manufactured, the real inspiration is right there. And it's always been sort of here around us.
Particularly if you have an innate interest in nature, and that's what.
Yeah, and I grew up around that, man. Like honestly, running to school through the woods and all this kind of stuff. There's a creek behind my house growing up in the burbs, and I was just fascinated by this stuff. I had turtles, and I did love collecting all this kind of things, skulls, all this kind of stuff, and I still have all this weird stuff. It's an odd mix. But yeah, like I love that stuff. And so what I try and impart on Zabby and them is that it's helped me when I go either now I can kind of do it as an art director and go, you know what, we're gonna mix in with this stuff I like, and then we just put it together, and then we all like kind of working on it because we all dig it, right? And I try and be collaborative like that with the guys. But the other thing is sort of, yeah, like even if we don't like it, so, game design comes up with something, we have to deal with it, and it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna like kill this thing, and it's like we may not know a lot about it. It's like, get into it, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, whether it's just like, I don't know, what does a laundromat look like in Kenya? I don't know if there's laundromats in Kenya, but you know what I mean? Whatever. Point is, figure it out, get behind it, like research that subject and let it come into your art so it feels that much more authentic. I mean, this is especially important when we're making, again, hyper realistic games or ostensibly hyper realistic games.
Well, I mean, you're a hell of an art director if you can get your crew excited about stuff. I do think it's like, there's either one or two possibilities in terms of like what's next, and one is that you just need to surround yourself with really like A-grade people who get you pumped up and interested in different things that force you out of familiar territory and expand your view of the world, or you eject from all of that and go the auteur route and try to make a go of things solo. Like you become a different person in the presence of other people. Other people are like chemicals that react with you, and they bring different reactions out of you. So I'm torn sometimes. I want to keep working with teams because teams pull different things out of me, and I may yet find a team that's really like tribalized and bonded, and we're all pushing towards a goal that we all feel really passionate about. Like iron sharpening iron, and like the excitement feeds off of other excitement, and that's a very infectious, positive thing. But then I also think there's value in the work that you get when you go off into the weeds by yourself, without any influence from your peers. So I get really caught between like, well, what do I really need? Do I need more people making a difference in my life, pushing me, involving me, people that I can be that force in their lives, or is the path of the monk, of the loner?
Right.
And it's there's value to both.
What do you feel like you're the most satisfied with between the two?
Well, I mean, the vain artist in me likes being the auteur. It's the best thing in the world to have a design you do, actioned without any questions or alterations. It doesn't really happen, but
really, right.
There's a lot of satisfaction to making something that speaks to your personal need, and then for that thing to continue on to its final form, untampered with, and sometimes a thing can be altered and made better, and your DNA is still in it, but then that final thing you can't really take full credit for because it took the collaborative effort of a whole village to get it to that point. I guess smugly, I like the smell of my own feces. I like to breathe in my own reverb.
Right.
It's a
don't we all though, in a weird way?
Like, I mean, true. Like I think everybody wants more of themselves in the world. Everyone is trying to inject their stank into it, and is a little bit hurt when
sure. I mean, the romantic sort of like the curse of the creator, and you just have to get it out, and then there's the self-indulgent side, which is like none of us are into this drawing for much more than like, Mom, put my drawing on the fridge, isn't it the best thing in the world? Like, and it's sort of those two parts of your
it's this amazing egoic battle, because in the morning, with your sketch pad or whatever, you can let loose and whatever you say goes, and maybe you live all kinds of weird little fantasies in your internal life, but then when you punch in, the ego has to be put in a cage, and you have to kind of cow to people up the pecking order from you and not kick up too much of a fuss about it. You can be strong and fight out your opinions, but generally people don't want to work with you if you're abrasive, so you have to be able to take the feedback and try to get something more to their liking out of it.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm taking a shot at sort of some art directing, because then I can be like, yeah, it's approved though. Now, it's like,
no wonder you have so much
try
job
to jump the
satisfaction.
fence.
Your
Yeah.
final work.
Well, I mean, no, a lot of what you're saying is ringing uncomfortably, sorry, close to home. Let's just say, yeah. I mean, I think we all sort of constantly do that. I mean, none of us became an artist because, of the hours you're going to put in and the commuting to the job and the weird manager you have and the sort of bizarre RSPs you need to think about and that part of it, I think, like just the idea of the office life, which it truly is. I mean, that's actually what it is. When you strip it back, there's other people that are going to a similar desk, but they're modeling. There's other people going to a similar desk, but they're doing accounting. There's other people. So ultimately, it's the dopest place I've ever heard of working compared to everybody that I know that's told me, my grandparents, my friends, my mom, whatever it is. It's like, game company is amazing when it comes to sort of how open and kind of just unbelievably, ridiculously sort of a joy it is to get paid to do it. But it's still going into some job, right? In a weird way. It's like it's still that thing. And I think ultimately it's the longer you do it, the more you're kind of like, you just yearn for change, right? I don't think as an artist you ever got into it to be literally, like I said, working at Ford for 60 years, right? That's not the philosophy that made you draw all these pictures and sort of like, look, I created this little monster and I want to color it now, and look, I made a book of it, and like it's a different mind, right? That's I think we're all kind of cursed with it, which is why it was my other sort of end of the spectrum from before. But
these games that we work on, they're incredibly appealing products. They create these wonderful feedback loops that are intoxicating for the players. And one can't help but look at the success of these projects and see how people take to them and not feel a hint of jealousy that one's own work can't evoke such a strong reaction in people. And you start to try to crack that code of like, oh, well, what my work need to say or need to look like, or what form would it need to take in order to evoke that strong reaction, like basically like the equivalent of having someone's head turn when you pass them because you're so damned attractive,
right?
Like you want and then you start to ask yourself, well, am I doing this to attract other people and to create a product that can lure people in, and or are you doing it because it's like a thing that you derive satisfaction out of? Like sometimes you can look at your work and be like, yeah, if I was the consumer, I don't know if this would really do it for me. The act of doing it was fun, but I'm left with something that is I can see why it's not going to garner the same kind of attention as a AAA video game or a motion picture. And there's a part of you that yearns to have a similar potency, because you see other people who somehow they wield the fire in a different way, and they're able to kind of like, there's that je ne sais quoi, that's something happening in the work that just makes people flock to it. And on some level, people are trying to kind of crack that code, either for adulation and acceptance, or because there's some itch that they're trying to scratch with their work that they just quite can't get at. And they're hoping maybe one day they'll jiggle the molecules in such a way that that reaction will happen, and they're trying everything they can think of, and I'm reminded of that phrase of I forget who said it, the crazy person does the same thing again and again, expecting different results. And
Right.
sometimes I feel like I'm on that hamster
Insanity.
wheel, just kind of delusional and flailing.
Right. Yeah. No, there's similarities there for sure. With
Sorry, I just wanted to switch
Oh,
course a little bit. Sorry to break the flow of conversation.
you totally broke it up, man.
I did kind of want to take questions from people.
Yes,
Right.
And there's
indeed.
one
The
in
1 hour
Their
mark.
chat that we can see.
yeah. There, if you go to twitch.tv/edgecontrol, but like I'll just read them out. Like Oscar Cafaro in the chat was asking to both of you,
Wait,
why do you
hold on.
guys think?
Can I ask you a question before we jump to question period?
Pardon?
Can
Can
you
I ask you a
ask
question before we jump to question period?
Like what? What happened?
He wants to ask you a question before we start taking questions.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Is it possible that I could take a 2-minute break and return for question period?
No.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
I
fine.
didn't wear diapers
I mean,
tonight, so
that's
Go
fine.
want to
ahead,
make a
go
mess.
ahead.
I'm just saying. Apologies.
No, it's cool. Like in the meantime, we'll just hang out here. Like there
You
was
ruined
a
our flow,
question.
so now I ruined your thing back, and it's all good.
It's all right.
Thanks, man.
We'll see you in a bit.
This live stream's the best. But like earlier, there was a question for Paul that I was kind of curious about. Like, why did you kind of let go of the blog that you were developing? Or, well,
I think it was Patreon too.
Patreon as well.
Yeah.
Oh, was it Patreon?
I think it was
So,
Patreon. I don't know.
It's
It was one or the other.
Patreon.
Patreon was like any other social platform. It's kind of a mind bender. It makes you pay attention to the numbers. In this case, that number is a dollar amount, and in my case, even though I was just kind of doing my normal thing behind a paywall, I reached a point where I felt like I wasn't seeing the return for the effort, that I was capping out at a rate that would not cover my costs. And so I essentially let the dream die. Perhaps I acted too soon. Sometimes I think I should have just kept the thing going and kept trying different methods, but there was a constant cognitive dissonance that occurred where I wasn't sure whether I was doing things for myself as I'd originally intended, or was doing them for the sake of trying to please the patrons and bolster their interests and attract new people. I was looking at the accounts of close friends with envy, and I was getting into an increasingly dark place where it was a combination of I guess lack of confidence in how long I would be able to sustain the thing based on the trends of where I saw people using that platform. I mean, if anyone's familiar with Patreon, you kind of know what sort of does the best on Patreon, and it's a lot of derivative works, which I'm not really about, and I felt like if I couldn't play that game, I would continue to be unsuccessful on that platform. My stubborn unwillingness to conform to the format was what sent me packing. Ultimately, I'm sure if perhaps I had been pulling in enough to cover rent or something, that might have changed my mind. But rent in Bellevue, Washington, is fairly exorbitant, and it's really not a cheap place to live.
Yeah.
So I guess I've had thoughts of creating a kind of resurgence and launching a new campaign under a different alias I've been using, but it hasn't really been a high priority. I mean, I guess I'm not starving, and that's part of it. If I was a little bit thirstier and had to make it work, maybe I would probably show a little bit more initiative on that front. I don't know if that's to blame, but I've just been having fun, posting stuff just for giggles. And I would be happy if I never had to convert it into a business, although that's where everyone's kind of going these days.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is a kind of a common ideology nowadays. Like I'm hearing a lot. Like Zabby brought this thing to mind, this saying to mind of like, you're your own brand now. And even like the ArtStation dude CEO, I remember his talk at Fan Expo here in Toronto. He was saying something like, you have to think of yourself as a small business.
Yeah, that's the reality. Certainly, that's the way a survivalist probably needs to be thinking. But I don't think that's while it is the reality, I don't think it's an especially nice way to come at this life. I think it's even though we all have to eat and have a roof over our heads. I kind of resent that using your personal lifeblood as a way to reap monetary rewards. Once it becomes a business transaction, the nature of the work changes. You can't quite put your finger on it, but suddenly you're doing something with a different set of motivations, which changes the work. And I guess it's the purist in me that like wants to keep a little bit of that that fire still going in the state that I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what every artist wants is to be able to do their thing the way that they would prefer to do it without having to make concessions. And then that's just magically the thing that takes off.
Yeah.
Usually what happens is that you have to tweak, you have to pay attention to what's going on, keep one ear to the ground, keep looking at what's doing well, and then tailor your work accordingly.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of that going on. And so I see a lot of people that are kind of solving some of the same problems and kind of getting on some of the same bandwagons. And I can't help but think that it's a bit desperate, and I just don't want to fall squarely into that category.
Yeah. I recently got into the Instagram game again, where it's not a game. I just want to be able to be, present and have people know I'm out there and whatever. And I've been going over other people's accounts, like the popular, like why are they popular? Why do they have so many millions of followers? And they all seem to have this very nice appeal in their work, even if it's different work. So to me, I was like, I don't want to lose my ideas. I don't want to do fan art. Exactly. Like I want my Instagram to be filled with the things I like. But then now what I want to do is find out how they're packaging and presenting it in a way. It's like if I can learn the packaging and presentation of things, then I can sell my own ideas and at the same time have the satisfaction of, yeah, look, mom, my drawing's on the fridge thing. Like other people are looking at it and have followers and likes, which kind of validifies your taste too. Like honestly, like, I believe in my work, but at the same time, it's hard to believe in it if others don't show some belief too, like fully.
No, you just gotta be delusional and be like, I'm a god, and then you just
Like
draw.
Kanye, it does work. We laugh at it.
Kanye, and then you just draw a lot, and then somehow magically people start to like your work, and you're like, yeah, I know you like my work because I'm a god.
Yeah.
And then you just keep getting like that. That's probably the most ideal situation, is just to do your own shit, and then people will like it regardless.
Yeah. Well, again, it sounds funny and whatever, but seeing my younger brother and everyone else, the way they talk and think things, they kind of want to see people that are so confident that they want to follow because of the confidence. Like, oh shit, this guy thinks he's the thing, so I guess I'm gonna follow him because I guess he's the thing.
That's a weird mentality.
Yeah, it's weird, but like, you trust him more than the other guy that's like, I don't think I want to do this. I'm not sure. Do you guys want to follow me? Like, I might do this, but I'm not sure about it. Like, why would you want to follow someone they're not sure about their own stuff in the first place?
I guess, but doesn't like the confidence show within like the knowledge? Like Paul, for instance, he has. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a disservice to like neglect some of the things that you've thrown out there. Like creative trickery is like mind changing. Like I think some of that stuff is, I don't know, like in itself, if you stumble across that, I don't understand how people just don't, gravitate to it. Like I would be sharing that like constantly. I should be sharing it.
There's just a lot of stuff these days, who can keep up with it all? And you know, honestly, it's like it's harder and harder to take offense to not being noticed when there's just so much standout material. There's so many people, and most of the people that I find are attracted to my work are people who are artists in their own right in some way, and in which case they're probably more worried about tending their flock than they are about simpering up to mine. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. The best, like most karmic way to go about it is just to put out the stuff that you're feeling and hope that people take notice in some circles.
Mm-hmm.
I have this feeling that the more I desperately want something, the less likely I am to get it. It works the same in love. It works the same with jobs. The more you want the job, the thirstier and more desperate you are. The more devastated and crushed you are, they can sense that. They'll smell it on you, and they'll run the other way. So it takes strength, sometimes strength that I don't have, to try to just tune out everything else and just continue on my path, in a way that I can be satisfied with it. Because sometimes I'm going on my path and I'm just like, dang, like you're talking about the idea of being confident, being the thing. Sometimes I'm just like, wow, maybe I'm just going completely in the wrong way. Some days I can feel very zealous about it and be fully in it. And then, not even a day later, have these questions about like, did I just waste all this time? Like, why do I keep going in this way? It's bearing no fruit. But then the next day I'm back on that path again. It's either it's incredibly rational or it's incredibly irrational, depending upon the mood you're in.
Yeah. There was a question asking, kind of derailing again, but someone was asking, is there a chance for you to do a Substrata book project again?
That's not the first time someone's asked me that. There was a publisher that had pinged me about that. You have to understand the nature of that project was we were coming off of a dark fantasy game. The studio Vigil Games was dissolving after THQ folded. And the impetus for that project was to kind of rally some of the same people that worked at that company that had gone off to places like Riot and Blizzard, etc., and get them all back together again to do something kind of in that vein, because it was a void that we were trying to fill in our lives. And this is an 80+ person anthology that was done as a charity project and published generously through Udon. So it was kind of like a perfect storm, of contributors from all over the world working on a thing that none of us were paid for. It was like a bonding experience, kind of more than anything, I think. So I don't know that if a second one was done, that A, there'd be like a big public cry for it, or B, if it would be able to be done in the same spirit that made the first one kind of special for all the participants. I think anthology books are awfully fun to throw together, and you can see a number of people that are doing projects like that all the time. There's all this, art on ArtStation. There's way more art books now being put together. And I'm sure all the people that made the first Substrata book who are really into dark fantasy and, like working in that vein would love to come back, but would they, if they found out that, I was netting profit from it, yeah, all that money was given away. So it's a sticky issue. Yeah, any of those people could probably make a book like that themselves and have it be less tricky in terms of like divvying the spoils and stuff. But so I hope that answers that. I mean, like, I think there's still a lot of enthusiasm in the artists to make work like that, but means, motive, and opportunity aren't quite the same now.
Have you ever considered making an art book? I know I'd love to have one, but
there's there's a certain level of polish that people expect for art books, and I tend to keep things more in the sketchier, looser vein. Doesn't lend itself as nicely to books. I've done books for conventions like CTN, Expo, and Burbank, where I table with my wife Lena, and she's made little books, and they have print runs of about 150, and what we don't sell at the con, we sell off to Stuart Ing. So it might be that if you hop over to Stuart Ing Books, he's still got a few copies of our books kicking around. But surely we produce a lot of work, year round, and it gets put in various places online. But it would be nice to have a collection. But I think in order to do that, I would have to probably make it myself and distribute it myself. There wouldn't be. I've gotten maybe one bite for a person that kind of wanted to do it, and these things are. There'll be some heat on it for a little while, and then it dies down, and or they want a certain deal from you, or who knows what. It's again, it's like commerce. Would I love to have a book out? Yeah, but it's like there's so many. Like, making the art is just so much easier. If I was a better businessman, if I just had more of this, this business acumen, I could be trying to turn my straw into gold for around the clock.
I think a lot of your strong sensibilities just purely come from like what you have in your head. Like, that's what I appreciate the most. So like,
well, thank you.
I'm curious about like. I know we talked before, but I'm curious about, for everyone else, like what you're going to be talking about at Edge Control. Well,
not to put too fine a point on it, but I want to talk about the experience of making art and the experience of, mostly for me drawing, but I feel like the end product that you get at the end, the rush of that quickly fades, and so what you're left with is the memory of whether or not the experience was any good. And as I'm quote unquote maturing, I'm trying to think of like what really matters to me. And I think if I can keep my interest sustained, if I can improve my experience making something, I'll spend more time on it, and I will put more love into it. And I think that what causes me to run from a work before it's gotten that level of attention is usually traced back to something faulty about the experience of making it. So I'm all about the idea of, being able to kind of like coax yourself into a state of mind where things are pleasurable enough that you want to stay there and not move on. I mean, a lot of artists in the crowd possibly, so a lot of people that probably suffer from attention deficit disorder, or they're flighty, imaginative people who, their brains move at a mile a minute, and they've got all this stuff that they want to get out. It's been an issue of mine trying to kind of puzzle out what makes me abort my work. What if I could only linger on it longer, possibly I would be able to nourish it to a state where others would find it a more tantalizing meal. It's usually enough to satisfy me in the moment, and that moment is usually, sometimes less than an hour. And it's like a brief little fling. But I just want to talk about the almost reducing art to its core movements, and what those movements, what it feels like to, skate the page and treat the page as this like space that you can enter into, and how limiting we are to ourselves in terms of the moves that we elect to make, and the new territory that awaits us once we break into those new set of moves. Really, it comes down to that, this thing in your hand going around like this, and what that feels like, and what it means to you.
You feel like the way that you approach design and art in general, how has that evolved over, your course of your career?
I'd like to think that it's become more organic. I'd like to think that the different parts are integrating. There's I used to segment everything into stages. Like first I'm going to do my thumbnail, and then I'm going to do my lines, and then I'm going to do my tones, and I'm doing my colors, and then my finishing touches. And I feel like I'm moving towards kind of a more like holistic approach, where, to quote my friend Garrett Hanna, that anything goes at any time. And I don't know if that comes from maybe having a slightly deeper understanding now of all the moves available and what certain things are going to accomplish when they're put down. But you look at somebody like Kim Jung-gi, and I believe he can not only have an image in his head that he's transcribing, but he can see into the future. He can set things up within a work that he can pay off later, and he gives himself those opportunities. He sees them as ripe opportunities to for the piece to branch. So he's figuring it out as he goes along, every bit as much as he receives a flash in his head. I don't know how exactly it works for him, but I know kind of how I want it to work for me, which is I want to have some precognition. I want to have some idea where I'm going, but I want there to be enough along the way to surprise me and keep me interested, almost like watching a movie that you've never seen, and observing all the plot twists and trying to kind of work out, okay, this is going to kind of go this way. Oh, no, it went the other way. Having art as a source of continual entertainment would be, I think as I get closer and closer to cracking it, the more and more like entertainment it becomes.
Well, how do you leverage that? Because like happy accidents, I guess that's probably the simpler way of putting it. Like I've been struggling for a long time trying to figure out like how do I approach something organically that enables some level of thinking and visualization beforehand, and while also allowing myself to discover new things. And like, because I feel like the way that I look at art most of the time and how I do it is like I'll see something as it happens. Like I'll scribble something and I'll be like, oh, okay, that can be this, or that can be a hand, or that can be whatever, and then it builds up from there. I'm trying to find a way to approach art in a way that lets me have an idea and not derail completely, but at the same time trying to discover it as it goes and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like what are some gems that you've discovered that help enable that organic flow of stuff?
Well, you're essentially asking me to steal my own thunder for the talk that I'm going to be delivering.
Damn it, I'm trying.
I mean, we could. Such a general question. Certainly, I want to be covering some of this stuff in the talk. It's a 2-hour talk, right?
Yes.
Yes, 2 hours.
Are people doing demonstrations mostly, or are they going to do
They do both.
I think Jung-a is planning to do a really long demonstration. I'm not entirely sure. It's pretty much up to speakers. It's their full discretion. They have 2 hours.
Yeah,
it's stuff that's really easier shown. I think we can. I'm more than prepared to sit here and discuss it verbally, but my hope in the presentation was to kind of split the difference between static slides and kind of more of a live demonstration.
Yeah,
for sure. That's usually the approach most people take, is talking and doing live demo and also even slideshows, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I was hoping to kind of like part of me was like, I shouldn't do slides. I should just open up Photoshop and the slides will be there as layers and I can go back to them or something. But it should be like you ever see those like old like television programs where somebody reads a story and there's an illustrator that's drawing kind of along in real time as the narrator reads? I always thought that was more compelling, but then I was just like, well, that kind of gives you a lot to do, and maybe you could get derailed that way. But I mean, drawing is like I really do feel like it's a sensual experience, and I feel like there's this quest to stay kind of in line with that, to enter into the work and not be too much on the surface of it. It's a real kind of, there's some real Zen stuff happening there, and of course I'll elaborate more later this month.
Yeah,
I think you can definitely tell the moment where the trance is broken and suddenly you start feeling like your stamina bar is reached at the top, your energy levels are capping out, your interest is waning. And so I mean, like, you'll hear these old tricks of like, oh, that's when you got to flip the canvas horizontal and see the image new again. Or there's this guy at ArenaNet, Teo Prinz, that does this genius thing where he will intentionally sabotage a work. He'll put some alien swipe of color or some kind of intruding mark into the piece that he then has to kind of like rescue it from, and that minor disaster that he's created serves as like a catalyst to like a second wind.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Welcome back, Tim. And
I've been listening for like.
Okay, you've been back for a while. Well, before we get deep into
want to interject.
Other stuff. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
No, I didn't want to, is what I meant.
Oh, I thought you said you want to.
No.
Basically, we have 30 minutes at most, so I want to get some of the questions that's out there over with. So
definitely.
We start with Oscar Cafaro, our good man. He did a talk last time. He's going to do portfolio reviews at the event as well. And such a beautiful guy. Yeah. Anyways, he says, question for Tim and Paul. Why do you think there's a fairly big misunderstanding between schools / concept art communities and the reality of the industry? And, in brackets, Tim knows what I mean.
Oh, right.
I'm going to get a glass of water. I'll let Tim start.
No.
Sure, yeah, no, yes. You guys are dehydrating people. Overhydrating people.
We make people do extra work for free.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, so I think the big, I think we all had sort of the same kind of misconception in a way. I think what happens is when you aspire to be an artist when you're younger, you're always looking at a finished product, really. Whether that was growing up with comics or, movie posters or whatever it was, it's sort of, now that I look back, it's like, oh wow, like a lot of us kind of each generation are growing up with kind of the same inputs in a way. And a lot of times, at least back then, what would reach you was like, it was actually pretty rare to find a dope sketchbook or a dope, roughs of something, basically. And even see the process. So it was a mystery. It was like how do these guys get there, right? And then eventually you sort of pick up some of the steps, and you kind of make your way kind of through that. But I think whenever we all fall in love with that, we're attempting, like, the goal we want to reach is this kind of polish in a weird way. And a lot of it's like finished pieces, and it feels like from the outside with the little information you have, it's like, I'm a concept artist, and you just look at all the portfolios on ArtStation, it's like I designed, like that's what I did, right? What it ends up being a lot of times that when we're actually working on the stuff there's a lot of crap you don't want to see, right? Essentially, it's visual problem solving for a production team when they've already got technical problems. They've already got all this other stuff they have to deal with building a video game, essentially, and making the actual assets that go in the engine for it to work. So ultimately, at least from my experience of being in the video game industry and sort of in-house concept art, is that a lot of it is sort of being reactionary and it's putting out the fires on the floor. So you're not necessarily doing the most beautiful. In fact, it's quite rare, aside from at the beginning of the project, I find when we're trying to like do conception and you're doing big inspirational pieces. That's when you sort of have to have a team, one that sort of loves the blank page, but two isn't afraid of making mistakes and just throwing them away. So and doing it to a high quality, because what you're trying to do is get the creative director to be able to get the producers to get whoever behind sort of this idea that it sometimes could just be one sentence. It could just be like, I want a ninja on horseback. I'm like, okay. And then you try and make something sick. In order to sell that, you want to polish it to a certain point. But in production, the majority of what you're doing when you're in-house, a lot of times is not the cool illustration. It's like, at least back in the day, there was shit like T-poses, right? Like we would literally have to draw the character T-pose because that's how they would model it, because that's sort of the resting position of a rig in a game. So then they would sort of like relax the arms and add the animation to it and all that stuff. And then that's where you actually get, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. I remember that threw me off coming out of art school. It was like, why can't we actually just paint the character all dope and then like model it the way you got to model it or whatever? But why am I making my illustrations look like these terrible blueprints? It was always super hard to do back then. I remember we used to do a rotation and literally like draw horizontal lines on a piece of paper with a ruler and like rotate the character basically in space. They were always terrible. They're like never really hit the 3D perfectly. Some guys were good at this actually. I'm sure Paul, you're probably excellent at it. But I didn't sort of come from that animation kind of seeing things in three-dimensional space. And so a lot of times in production, it's like, hey, paint over this quick terrible texture that's on this one thing and make it look like how it should look like, and then add in what the fallen leaves should be and some water puddles and make it look like our kind of how our engine would maybe render it a bit, and then they can pass it to like a lighting team and it's like, do that in 10 minutes, you know what I mean? We need that, like blah blah blah. So when you're in production, there's a whole phase of like really designing the world, but it depends again on the project and the genre and like the company and the art director and all this stuff of like what they actually want to do. And then you're just hammering all this stuff out and it has to be compartmentalized. So somebody's doing big picture paintings of the whole thing, right? So what we would do is get Nacho, if everybody's familiar with Nacho Yahweh's work. Nacho's fantastic dude. So what he'd do is like, he's really great at these big picture, sort of like the vibe, right? Setting sort of like the big picture tone of stuff. And then somebody like Kafaro would jump in, right? And he'd be doing like sick props and the actual industrial design. So I always tried to align sort of all the pieces like that, but a lot of it isn't the money illustration. It's not that one piece you're so proud of that you want to get printed and hang on your wall. It's like, they made me, again, like my first analogy, like you have to do a garbage can. So there's actually a lot of it is that, and a lot of it is sort of you're actually part of the blueprint makers for the art content team in the game. And you're trying to help them as much as you can, whether that's storyboards for effects, whether that's like, hey, do a quick thing for marketing so they can sell some poster idea. Whether like you're jumping all over the place, which is really great. I find everybody gets a lot of taste of different stuff, which puts pressure on different artists in different ways. But I think a lot of times you look on ArtStation, everybody's got such a tight style potentially. And when you do that, it's going to be very difficult for certain art directors, certain projects to see where you fit there.
How do you develop a particular skill set for that then?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just it depends on sort of your training almost in a weird way. It's like if your fundamentals are there, you can probably handle it. But a lot of times, earlier on in the industry, at least we were afforded time to be pretty shitty, to be honest. Like a lot of stumbling, a lot of bad designs, a lot of rejection, a lot of like figuring that out. But luckily, I think it helps when you start at a place that really doesn't, wants to foster that and sort of polish up some diamonds in the rough if that's the case. And so I think at a certain point when you're from the outside looking in, all you see is the stuff they pick for the art book, the marquee stuff. You don't really realize all the headaches behind it, all the sort of all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into every decision. The weird thing of like, oh yeah, that's the one they used, the dumb one I hated, but they picked it. Like there's there's a lot of it went for me at least from being this idea of like I'm gonna be sitting beside George Lucas designing Darth Vader's helmet to we need to design a what now where what and it's like you're literally just trying to help people solve problems, and I mean there's a lot of visual problems in games too, right?
Could I add something?
Yep, yeah.
Oh well, I think as more the teams expand and you're not dealing necessarily with creatives on all sides, that there's that issue of like people are less impressed by the early work. They consider it ugly and unfinished, and, not polished. They're not looking at it with artist's eyes. They need the food chewed for them, so that they can see it and believe in it, and it looks tangible to them. It looks like something that is damn near close to the end product. I guess part of me does lament that your things could get done a lot quicker and a lot more pleasurably if people could buy into some of these things at their more nascent stages.
Yeah, definitely.
I
mean, for me, that's a benefit in the sense that, at least, and well, Zabby can answer this, but I mean, I feel like I do a better job at that just because I came from being a concept artist. So, I mean, feel free to contradict this, of course, Zabby, but knowing what sort of people go through and sort of like what it kind of takes to get there, just emotionally, right? To do a great painting of something and to really like stare at the highlight on this character's shoulder and the way it's going to glance off this armor over here or whatever. I mean, you have to be into that. And it's frustrating when you do a lot of really high quality stuff and people are still trying to figure out, is it a Western or are we on Jupiter, and you're just like, oh my God, okay, we're not building a base here to build upon, right? And so for me with the guys, especially even with Gafaro, when we work together, we just do a couple doodles on the whiteboard in literally 10 minutes and we both see it. We both know what it is. And then I'm totally comfortable spend the next week just polishing that. Like, you get it. You're not going to make some wild stuff now. We've sort of come to terms with that. And now it has to go through a whole bunch of other departments. So that's where it's like, I do my best for the team to try and be as informed with, the rig has to match this thing that we're going to rip from over here, or hey, we're actually going to get something custom, so don't worry about it, and animation needs this to happen, gameplay wants this, blah blah. You try and feed as much of that as you can, but it's harder, in the phases of the project. It's harder at the front end because essentially they need that polish to basically be the first iteration of the game, right? You just hear a sentence, you take that to like, boom, screenshot. This is what your game would look like. So the quicker you can do that, the quicker you can throw out terrible ideas about a ninja on horseback or whatever sort of the pitch is at the time. But later, when it's about production, and these guys are blessed to work with a lot of really great people, and if we can sort of determine that off the bat, we try not to waste a lot of time in like, well, I didn't think the thumbnail would turn into that. It's like I hope, Zabby, again, you can confirm or not, but we don't. I tend to think we're close enough to the process to not be too freaked out about that. And then, so for me, it's easier to be like, literally, we can do a super classic concept process if we wanted to. We don't really, because I feel like some of that process is sort of like just do it at your desk yourself and let that inform kind of the options you provide, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But if we wanted to, we could sit down and go, just do silhouettes. Let's pick these three. and then, okay, do like a tone on it. Okay, cool. Let's pick this one. Now polish that one. Now give us color. Now give us like a rendering of it. Do that whole thing. Put it in a scene. Light it. I want to see some storyboards around the effects on it. Like we can totally break that down and do that. But I think that works better, when you're doing animation and stuff that stays within, like that is the product. Problem I think a lot of times for concept artists is like we forget that we're inspiring the actual product, at least with games. And movies, I assume, is the similar, right? Is like you do this amazing thing, and then they're actually gonna now the product is something else, right? It's not like we're making an art book. It's not.
And I really can't imagine that every place has, I mean, this totally makes sense for an organization like Ubisoft or Epic. These are big companies making big games, but not everybody out there is, beholden to these, crazy high, super far-reaching standards. Some people are actually out there making kind of more modest creations.
Yeah.
Smaller scale stuff, or stuff that is just kind of like quaint, and there's nothing really wrong with being simple and quaint. I guess
it sounds wonderful, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, I can bulk about what it's like to be a production artist at a big company, but really it's like I knew what I was getting in for. I knew what kinds of products these people made going in, so I can't really protest, but I can say that I've worked for places that are smaller scale, and the work that gets done there is it's more felt, it's more direct, and it's less labored over, and because there's not all that thrashing and second guessmanship of going through like a committee process, you wind up with something that's a little bit fresher feeling. Maybe it won't work with the market research people, but it works with that product. And I feel like there's studios out there like Double Fine and
well, I think that kind of process speaks to who we are as artists initially, right? You're trying to speak something new and fresh into the world. That's the whole point. You feel like your perspective is different. You have a voice, and you want the world to at least be like, whether they like it or not, you've at least sort of breathed something in there that wasn't there before you. And ultimately, a lot of those kind of smaller companies are the places where you're going to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Some people really they like that. They're really stimulated by the like, how close can I viz dev this thing to the actual thing, and they're of that mindset that they want to create the, like you said, the marquee images and stuff. But I guess you find out quickly once you're put into a position where you're expected to make something like that, whether or not it jives with you, and that can be an indicator of gosh, should I be setting my sights elsewhere? Students sometimes they don't know what side of the fence they fall on. They don't know if they want to work on the realistic title or the smaller stylistic title. They're trying to kind of like hedge their bets and stuff that appeals to party A and B, and so it's like
I feel like when I was younger, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like I feel like the older I got, the more I kind of have come to terms with who I am, and so now it's easy for me to say, but it's like, I think whether you're into actual concept art, which is literally do me a thumbnail sketch. I don't care about polish. We need something tomorrow, and we need to build it now, right? And then I like actually polishing a thing where I can sign my name at the bottom and like, this is me. And in a weird way, I think they're different things, and I think if everybody's sort of honest with who they are like that, and like I told you, that was I never, looking back at college and not being the one to sketch a million versions of something, I'm not the obsessive type that wants to get the perfect curvature and the perfect sort of beautiful kind of version of it. But I work with guys that are like that, and they love it. And I love working with them because those are the guys that are going to just keep that consistency up, right? I'm more sort of like here's half of the skull sketch thing I kind of want. Okay, now I'm done the sketch. Okay, let's paint this thing before I'm like bored of this. And it's like way more sort of inspirational, I guess, and thus leaves a lot of interpretation. So I don't know whether that's kind of more of an old school, or like you said, is that stylistic? Is that sort of a response to the environment because things are faster or not? I just find I'm slow too. Like if I'm rendering, I'm super slow, and if I'm trying to be accurate, I'm like really slow with it because I'm pretty logical in the way I like to think about things. So I end up knowing that, wow, the light shouldn't hit like that. Oh gosh. And whereas like there's other people, Notch is a good example. You can tell he feels his paintings, or Victor Mascara is like, they feel it. You know what I mean? They're not laboring. They're not trying to like, well, the light of the sun that comes over this angle is going to hit this building, and then doing all this different uh, sort of, just pining over sort of the complexities of the physics of light in the image you're trying to make or whatever. They're more trying to make you feel something from the light that they're painting, and I admire that immensely because I think I almost feel like I personally think too much when I do my work. But the funny thing is, if when you see my work, potentially, it doesn't look like that. So it doesn't look like these, super epic sort of ultra realistic. I feel like like I can hit that if I need to, but it's not the kind of work I would like want to put on the header of my website or
No,
something.
your ideas are great. They speak for themselves, even if it's not a full render. Like I went through Tim's like sketches that he doesn't post online, right? And it's really, really good because I haven't seen those certain sketches in ArtStation before and stuff like that. And that on its own is like, wow, that's cool. And
Right, yeah.
like,
But it's funny because like yeah, Zabby said that to me before, but to me it's the same as everybody else. It's like that's your weird page 9 of your sketchbook that you're like, look at that dumb thing I did there. Like that's all it is. But like all of us think our own is shit, really.
true.
And the funny thing is when and a lot of us that, once you hit a level where you can draw fairly well, um, and out of your own imagination or whatever it is, there's something really powerful with that. And I think other people they don't like, notice all your mistakes. If you've gotten this good, it's
Yeah,
because you noticed your mistakes and you tried to fix them. That's how you got better.
true.
So at the point that you have, yeah, these like kind of unfinished sketchbook pages or whatever, to me there's like, oh, I love the way the ankle is. I'm actually looking at one right now. It's a cool head, but then I just like like just the posture and everything just falls apart. And I'm unlike you, Paul. I'm sort of half rendering, Photoshop painting, sort of drawing. I was like combining 50 different sort of old school traditional processes to get where I was never as disciplined to be able to be like, finish the pencil sketch and then color the sketch and then walk through it. And so it's for me it's way more messier. And so when I look at a page, it's just like I only see like, yeah, but look at that stupid. Why did I do that? It's not a perfect page, right? And so it's a weird thing. And that's where I feel like when I do my illustration, which to me is sort of what I took in school, which to me is rendering your concept. Let's break it down like that sort of for everybody. That's when I start to like take the time to do it, and it takes me forever. It's like I'm really slow. I mean, Zabby and them know I still try and do as much designing as I can when I can, and I'm not fighting other battles.
Yeah.
um, and it's just laborious. It takes quite a long time. And I find lately too, it's like I can still ride a bike, um, fairly well, but it takes me a while to get up to speed now, just because it's like, yeah, doing art direction stuff in a huge company like that's a lot more meetings and dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff. But I selfishly try and conspire to always be sitting with the guys in the concept row, so I at least like sort of have a little bit of a touch on the heartbeat.
Yeah. As a new person to the industry, I personally render things to the nth degree, even if it's a thumbnail or whatever. Is like I sort of don't have the respect that you have and other people have, of course, for a good reason, because I don't have the years of experience. But how can I sell my idea and thoughts to these art directors that look at me as the fresh guy without
Well,
like
so
falling behind? Like so, I kind of have to like render it in a way. And every time I've tested it, every time I've given something that's closer to the final, I've had less revisions asked for. Like they're like, oh, it's cool, I see it, okay, just change the color a bit and that's it. And every time I gave more options, like this is my thumbnail before I proceed, it's been like, I don't know if you should go in that direction. This isn't about you because you and I do verbal talk and then we get things done. More like in other art directors, other people I
Right. Well, and
interact with.
I love, because again, 'cause I'm coming from that. I just love going like, "Hey, Zabby, make a rocket launcher," and then I don't say anything else. I don't know if you're going to look up an RPG-7. I don't know if you're going to look up like an American AT4. Like, I don't know what you're going to actually use as your reference, and I love that. Like, that's the point of being concept artist. No, I don't want to have to go in there and go, "I want an RPG-7 with an orange tip." And there's stripes in the back and a black strap. And if you don't give me that, what the f are you doing? You know, so I still like to keep that alive, and it's hard, right? Because there's like I'm not the only art director, so there's a lot of other sort of dynamics going on, and it's risky to do that. But fuck it. I mean, we're making art for games for fun, getting paid for it. I think that's part of it too, right? Is like, shh, we're getting paid for this. Don't tell anyone. But the word's getting out, so it's like, geez. But I think ultimately, Zabby, what's funny is that, well, and you know this, if the person is engaged and actually paying attention and sort of like really into the design phase with you, you can show them those thumbnails and they pick the one that you both agree on, you both is your favorite, and you take that and polish it, and it shouldn't be like you're setting that up because you're saying, I'm not finished, but I want your input at this stage, right? What you're doing, and which is exactly what happened to me too, is at a certain point you go, yo, art director dude, this is what it should be. And I got to tell you, as an art director, of course that's amazing because I trust you. We wanted to hire you and get you on the team. You do amazing stuff. That's what I want to see. When I ask you to do this thing and then you come to me with 15 and go, which one, Dad? Is like, you know what I mean? Like, literally, you don't know. So it's that confidence. And the other side is like, and I've told you that, you don't even need to polish. You can take it to a point and then you can just kind of, you don't have to complete every line. It's not, and it's like, because that, as I've said, that doesn't necessarily make the design stronger. All you're doing is sort of saying, and for other people, like we've talked about, like more business people or people you're pitching stuff to, that's the kind of thing that they'll hang on. Yeah, but you miss this thing in the corner, right? You just don't want people to see that. It's like effects in movies, right? It's like the best visual effects are you didn't know were visual effects. And that's a testament to how good they were. So in a weird way, it's like if you can get away with a half dashed line and a little touch of rendering, Cafaro does that very well. And it's the focal points just have enough of the polish that you can be actually efficient and effective, and you can sort of, like Paul was saying, you can get off of things before you're 12 days in just hating life, even though it's an amazing design or it's an amazing thing you're doing. You're just done with it, right? There's something about wanting to be a concept artist that's fleeting. Like there's a spontaneity you want to sort of capture, right? You want to be like, here's what I think would feel the silhouette, and then we do this, and okay, I'm bored. Can we do something else now? And it's like I feel that a lot, and so I try and sort of encourage that. And I think it also, for me, it's like those, because I've sort of love painting, and I love sort of a broken, it's like the old Disney trick. If you're not going to hit perspective perfectly, the second that you lay down a perfect perspective line, or let's say you want to paint over a render that's perfectly made in 3D, the second that you break, something's broken when everything else kind of has been set up and is so mathematically perfect, then it's glaring. But when everything sort of has this nice loose spontaneous flavor, there's a humanness to it, and I think that's what is the most preserved in using pencil and sort of doing line and stuff. And even in Paul's work, it feels like that. I think your work has a great energy, Paul.
Thanks.
I'm saying to guys, I really like also the control of sort of your shape language and sort of your discipline with it. Let's just say.
I did want to direct that question to Paul, actually. Like how, like someone was asking in the chat, are there any tips that you have for selling a sketch to a client or art directors?
Yeah, it's this game of strategy that Tim's been talking about. So suddenly the artist is less concerned with the thing they're doing and more concerned with how they can present it in a way that as to guarantee its survival. Well, um, having nice garnish for the page never hurts. I think a page that's laid out nicely and has some really strong dominant element. Say you're doing a 3-up of the same character, making one slightly larger always is the one that you typically like.
Right.
That helps create a little bit of hierarchy on a
These are the pro
otherwise
tips. You
bland
want to write
page.
these ones down.
Like putting a more pronounced color note on one. Also, giving them something that they can take away is valuable. Like having some element that it's easy for them to kind of hone in on, and they'd like it were it not for this one little thing. So if the face is a sticking issue on a character, having a little call out with a different B or C head option gives them something to chew on, where they can, well, I like A, but with head number 2.
Right. Yeah.
Giving something that they can just vocally.
Let them participate. I mean,
it's not like
smart,
give us something that looks. Can we see A, but more this way or that? If you can provide some little slight differentiation, then they can be like, oh, I like the one with the bandana more, versus a thing that maybe is by its lonesome.
Yeah, and it's like Mr. Potato Head. They kind of feel like I've made the character.
Right.
Like,
I don't think it's necessary to like Tim is saying, present 15 ideas, because then, poor Tim then has to. It's a kind of a load for him, overload right off the bat. So thinning it down to like a lesser number of options, clearly labeled, so that they can, they don't have to be like, oh, the one on the far left, just label them one
I meant the far
3.
left second row. Yeah.
Yeah. Make the page easy to read.
I mean, this is the funny thing with all this too, is like we used to do this back in the day when I was first starting, and it was like we all learned composition in school, so I mean, you can drive their eye to the one you want them to see, can't you? Like, so we used to play these sort of games where it was like, in your layout, if you have some sort of like ghosted background element, there's a way to sort of subconsciously lead the eye, which is what we all should be thinking about making compositions, to exactly where you want it to land and where you want it to stay and where you want it to like spend enough time that it falls in love and approves it. And so we used to do a lot of this stuff once we sort of hit a point where we were looking for kind of a little bit of what Paul's talking about, like how do I spice this up a bit? Because I think once you've done it for a few years and you've had some success with it, internally in a studio, and things are going well and people like your work and you're getting a lot of the characters now, or they always come to you for this or whatever it is, then you kind of, okay, and what next, right? And it's like, unless you're gonna do some management stuff or sort of pursue wanting to like be the lead or do any of that stuff, there's a point there where you're like, how do I really enjoy this? How do I really kind of open the throttle on this thing, right? And there's some fun things that we used to do, sort of similar to that. But I think it's also how genuine you can be with your art director or the creative director or whoever it is, just to have those discussions. I mean, I feel like if you're creatively open and you're not afraid of criticism, and you can't be. I mean, the biggest pro tip is kind of, you don't own the work, so relax for a second, for one.
The criticism is definitely coming, and I don't think there's any way to circumvent. There's no way to flag your work against criticism. Like I said, I'm 2 decades in, and I don't walk around in impermeable armor. There's always feedback the next day.
Totally.
Furthermore, the minds that are involved, there's many at the same time. So what resonates with party A doesn't resonate with party B. So it's almost, I don't want to say it's an unwinnable war, because there are tactics like the ones we've been mentioning, but you might just want to chill back on that and just accept the fact that the thing is going to get diddled with.
Oh yeah, no, and probably in ways you don't comprehend, and um, I mean, they may even, there's a classic example. I think Mike Sabalge, who's art director at EE now. There's a classic example we used to talk about. I think it was either him or Craig Sellers, and I never worked with Craig Sellers. We didn't overlap at Silicon Knights, but there's a thing where they had done some kind of vehicle, and I remember him telling me this story where it so it clearly has a front and a back. I mean, if you're doing vehicle design, simple sort of bare bones, bare minimum place to start is with vehicles, there's a direction of travel. So regardless of whether it's a dump truck or a sports car or a jet or any of that stuff yet, and you're getting into crazy shape language like actual details and stuff of real functional aerodynamics or mechanical design, whatever it is, there's still a direction of travel. So everything needs a face and a butt. That's sort of the idea. And then now you inform it by what is it actually functioning, right? But they did this design that apparently, like, it was clearly moving in one direction, some snow vehicle or something like that. And everybody loved it, but the big takeaway was we want it to go backwards. It's hilarious because it ended up being this kind of marquee piece in this one game we had, and it's fun because if you just looked at it and you ever look at vehicle design, it's clearly going the wrong way. But the director at the time was, he was adamant this way looks better. And the the designer is just like, well, okay, it's approved, I guess. Like, I'm happy about it, but sometimes it's such an affront to your sensibilities and the kind of like thought you put into things. And so yeah, they like it. It's great. That's all you really care about, I guess. But then at the same time, it's just like taking your baby and saying this thing walks on its head now. And
it's a bit of a catch-22 because you have to imbue a thing with love in order to care enough about it to know that it's down in your heart of hearts and be able to put that in front of somebody. But
it'll be murdered just as viciously, maybe, right? Yeah.
But then you have to be impartial enough, removed enough that it's not a devastating blow when they don't select any of them.
Yeah, that actually took me, I don't know how long it took you. That took me a while because I still felt really fragile sort of at the beginning. Like, I wasn't like, am I even good enough to do this? So it was kind of, you're kind of hanging on every word a little bit. And it took me a long time to sort of realize that it was me putting that on the work myself. And it's like, you know what? It's what if they don't like it? I mean, I don't know if I had this illusion that, like, if you do one design as a concept artist that they don't like, they start to doubt whether you even have it, man. And it's like, it's so far from the truth if you're working with reasonable people that have actually done this themselves. It's difficult, right? It's difficult, like you're saying, Paul, that it to get a design through, on the actual direct route, sort of if Zabby was to do something and then it comes, I approve it and it goes up. The direct route sort of on the project is probably five steps up for actually, like, yes, I like that. Beyond that, there's another literally 100 people that could chime in from HQ all over the place and go, what's up with that thing though? And they wouldn't. The chances are they wouldn't, but each one of those stages also has teams involved. So yes, it may be the game director, gets a say in it. So he's one of the 5 you're going through before it gets sort of approved by the creative director or something. But who knows? Like, he might send it to his whole team of game designers, and then they all chime in, and they have their own email chain, whatever. And then it comes back, and all the the management, all the PM for sort of the concept department says is, well, here's the feedback we got from the other departments, and I can do my best to be like, this, no, that's them, wanting to make it red again. We're not doing that. This is this weird idea they have because they want to tie it in with this other thing, which, as far as I'm concerned, and what I hear from animation, is it's going to get cut. So don't worry about that. That branding on it's going to change. So we don't need to do a pass on that yet because we can just have it blank, and we're going to put the world global branding on it later once it gets finished. But you don't know. So yeah, you can just, it's like, it's the insane, the amount of sort of um, things that happen. And I think that's why, like, part of my job as an art director is sort of just try and protect the team like that, right? Is to, we can battle, as far as I'm concerned, we can battle it out sort of in the dojo, in the concept department, and blood, sweat, and tears, and like cry there, um, you know, cry in the dojo, laugh in the battlefield, right? So then I like to be able to say, look, we put this through the ringer as much as we could. We've run out, we've talked to animation, we've done all the things we could to back check this thing. Now I'm going to run it through the pipe. And usually, if we've done our due diligence with that, which is frankly hard to do with every asset in the game, but for key things, we try and do our best to sort of make sure that we're vetting the idea in the first place, vetting sort of what are the restrictions technically and otherwise, and then actually getting down to actually doing it. And then it's something I feel like I can manage, right? It's hard to manage when uh, manage a baby that we want to see give birth in the final game, when got the wrong metrics, and oh no, this robot has 12 legs and instead of 3 now because they wanted to do something. It's like, oh man, like that stuff, when they make changes like that, you can't do much. But if we're talking about just like, I'm not feeling the way it looks, those battles I think I can win. And so that stuff is like, I like to mitigate it so it's possibly just about that, or conversely, obviously, just about will it work in the game. So we try and do our best to put as much of a confident sort of face forward, because that does a lot. I don't know how you feel, Paul, but like the amount of times that we go into a meeting and it's like, if I'm just down that day, it's like, we did some stuff, it's, yeah, to be honest, it's good, but whatever. Versus if I go in and I'm like, we made the most amazing things you've ever seen. Now check this out. You guys are gonna love it. They're all smiling. They're like, oh my God, it was great. And it's like, so it's all approved? And they're like, yes, it is. And it's amazing sort of the human touch, and how that can help. And I think it's also trying to be, what I try and do for the guys too, is to be actual extra cognizant of, what does the game actually need, right? A lot of times we all do want to just do sick art. And we're selfish with that in a weird way. And to serve the other team's needs, at least, means it's just has that much more of a percentage of that it's going to get through, and you're actually going to see it in a huge Ubisoft, like an Assassin's Creed game or something, right? Like that. If we just go off the rails and be crazy, and stuff's never sort of fitting metrics, and we don't know how it's going to be animated, we don't know the restrictions on cloth, we don't know how certain things they can render and certain things they can do, or effects that are possible or not, you can set yourself up for a lot of disappointment, because sure, we can render the F out of it and make the most amazing thing in 2D, but if they can't achieve it, we're not doing them a service, and we're not doing ourselves a service in a weird way. So
Can I make
that's why I think we all go home and then draw some crazy shit at home, right? But
So sorry, Tim. You the concerns you're bringing up. You're an art director. There's 1,000,001 concerns. You've got about 80 plates spinning at the same time. All these considerations from higher up, and these higher up guys, they're probably floored with work coming in from all sides, and they're evaluating a lot of stuff all at once. The thing I was going to bring up, particularly to the entry level concept artist, it's that when you're doing your work, you're really into that one thing. You've really got that one thing going on. So it's easy to believe that the sun rises and sets on the thing you're currently doing. But and you can speak to this, Tim. But it's like I'm pretty sure that when that work finally reaches Tim or another art director, they're not going to be judging it through that kind of like super harsh, like this is just one task of many. And you'll get through it. They usually guide you through it. You come out the other side with something different usually, but the failure or whatever of not having a design accepted is really in the grand scheme. No one's really taking tally. Tim, do you?
Yeah, no, of course not. I think as long as I think after a while, you would notice it if it's like. I think part of it's on the responsibility of the leadership to actually be able to do that, right? If we're making a realistic game and then we hire you, Paul, to do the designs for it, well, that's a failure of recognizing what you do as an artist and what we want for the project. So there's that, there's a component to that, which is just building a great team in the first place, that can actually achieve what you want to do. And I think that's having it's not just, a concept artist isn't a concept artist isn't a concept artist. Everybody has their strengths and sort of weaknesses, and even as well-rounded as some of us may be, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy it. And at the same time, I think if you set up the team in the right way to be able to work together and leverage each other's best work, thus elevating everybody together, is where I think we don't think enough about that. I don't think people really, a lot of times it's so personal, like we're saying, where you learn to draw because you kind of put on your headphones and you just sat in the corner and you spent those 10,000 hours, doodling to yourself. It's very self-indulgent, and so that can lead to a professional life where, yeah, you think it is the be all end all, right? I try with the guys, I think, to with our team, and because I'm sort of, I'm sort of embedded with the concept team particularly. What for me works is sort of just being cognizant of as much of the bigger picture as I can see to know, how much it really matters. So I try and impart that on the guys. For everybody just starting out, you're going to want to treat anything you're rendering or whatever it is, any task, as like a chance to learn, how do I render Chrome, and what does like this sunset look like, and like Zabby was mentioning earlier, like just coming, having a better library to draw from when you have to design.
Right.
And that's just experience. That's just life experience, right? And ultimately, like that, and just learning the hard skills, the first couple of years is like just everything you paint or draw, whether I like drawing mechs, but I have to do these flowers. You can learn about materials. You can like learn how to actually render. You can do all these things. You can learn about fractal structures. You can actually find out about this cool nomenclature of Latin words for flowers. I don't know what it is, but there's things to get out of everything, and particularly when you're painting anything, you should be able to see that that's gonna, my painting of flowers is gonna apply to my mechs later. Don't worry. If you can't see that each brushstroke is just another mile on, your pen, and like the journey you're going to kind of take in your whole career, then I think you're missing it. And some of the best development I think I had was doing subject matter I don't like, because then it was all about the technical, right? It was just all about like, how does this old church look? Okay, I'll like check it out, blah blah blah. I want to paint robots, and then I'll move into a phase where I'm like really into westerns or something, and like, oh no, now we're working on a robot game, and I could care less. But you constantly sort of are able to apply that, and then any challenge isn't really, too sort of difficult, I guess.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think I've gone way off the rails, but
no, no, it was beautiful. It was great. But it's been 2 hours and 16 minutes. I think we need to let people go and let you guys rest. We did amazing. Didn't even notice the time fly. But before we
for
go,
real.
I want to say a couple of things, like congratulations to the winners of the Firestarter magazine competition, where you had to share and comment your favorite artists. So the winner are Peter Capritzes and Van Lawrence Ching. I'm sorry I butchered your name, but if you're watching, you'll get your ticket eventually. We'll send it over.
Bam.
Yes, you won a free ticket to Edge Control. Wow, feel proud.
What?
Amazing.
Look at that.
Amazing. Look at that. Yeah. So we will send out the tickets soon. Thank you so much for everyone that participated and shared the word around. We're just pretty excited to see you guys soon. And I know that recently there's been a lot of confusion. It's like, okay, what's happening to the venue? You said there was fire and water, and you said it will still happen, but you didn't say anything about the venue. So to update you on that, we have two options, both good in one way or another. We're just making the tough decisions of committing to one, but regardless, the event will happen, and we'll update you as soon as possible. It won't be that long, a couple of days maybe. and from there onwards, it's just smooth sailing, and we'll see you at the event. And until then, we'll still have streams like this. So do keep on the lookout for any kind of news about that. We still have a lot of guest speakers and portfolio reviews to go over. And today, and to announce, yes. And today you went over 2 guest speakers, and they're gonna do amazing work during the event. And as you heard, they have a lot to say, and you're gonna hear more from them at the event. 3 days. Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
Well, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunity, guys. And Paul, it's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Tim, and it's going to be a pleasure to meet everybody face to face.
Yeah, definitely continue our deep heart chat.
We're gonna have a lot of fun.
Tim and Paul.
Yes.
I love fun.
Yeah. Also, apologies for the last stream. We actually don't have it. We had technical issues, so it didn't record. We're sorry.
Sorry, Cafaro.
Yeah. Sorry, Cafaro. But we will post this one. I think this one probably worked. Thank you again. Have a wonderful night.
I'll do a makey uppy with Cafaro if you want.
Oh, that's
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
You tag team it.
Why not? Why not? There we go.
And talk about industrial springs and robotics and wires and perspective.
All right. Okay.
So we'll see you guys later in the next stream. Follow us on Facebook for updates. That's the best place. And we also have an Instagram for like behind the scenes stuff. If you wanna look at that. That's fun.
All right.
I think that's good for me.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See y'all.